Hi, I'm Gary Kim, the editor of Carrier Evolution, and I'm here today with Scott Puopolo from Cisco. And actually, Scott, you are from a part of Cisco that a lot of people don't actually interface with on a daily basis. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you actually do?
Sure, I appreciate that. Well, I'm part of an organization called the Internet Business Solutions Group, and it's shortened to IBSG. And I'm the Vice President and Global Head of the Service Provider Practice for IBSG. We're actually Cisco's captive management consulting arm. So we literally work with Cisco customers. I work in the service provider and media space. I work with those customers to help them develop business strategy that is unique to their business, independent really of Cisco products and services. We were invented back in 1998 when John Chambers felt that it was important to change the nature of relationships that Cisco has with its customers, go beyond being a vendor and really be a business partner. So he developed our organization, and we operate as a strategic advisor to our top customers.
So you've got actually an insight that I think is probably more relevant for almost everybody at the PTC, because everything you do deals with business model, revenue, margin, new products.
That's absolutely correct. We see the industry right now as being driven ultimately by two very important but countervailing forces. One is obviously the industry's continued need to focus on cost optimization to deliver the lowest unit costs possible to stay competitive. But where the really interesting things are happening, frankly, are on the growth model side. Those new business models, the role of service providers in the new ecosystems, how to work with over-the-top players, those kinds of things.
Now, interestingly enough, for most of its history, service providers have made money from one side of the market and only one side, namely subscriber fees. And while that's a good thing to do, a lot of people think maybe that's not going to be sufficient in the future to drive a business. There's this notion of a two-sided business model, which might be the most important concept in all of telecom today. What is a two-sided business model?
Sure. Well, by the way, I completely agree with you, Gary. I think that the industry is shifting such that the role of a service provider as just gaining revenue or subscription fees from consumers is only part of the story. If you actually look at the ecosystem today, service providers with the intelligence of the network and capabilities provided through cloud infrastructures really help content media and businesses reach consumers. And so if we believe, which I do, that we're going to see a significant increase in digital content over the internet, if we see continued fragmentation of content providers, media companies and content providers are going to need to very much focus on how to best reach those end customers. And the role of the service provider as an intermediary becomes extremely important, as an intermediary and aggregator. So a two-sided business model in the way we define it is really the idea that a service provider can actually add value to the way media companies, aggregators, advertisers reach their end audiences. They provide services that can be based on their network, can be based on their customer service capabilities, can be based on their billing capabilities, to actually enhance the value that a content company can provide to an end customer.
So I guess one way of looking at that is, and I spent quite a few years in the cable TV business, and I've been a journalist for nearly 30 years. So basically what you're saying is you can double dip in terms of revenue. You get revenue from advertisers or content providers as well as from end users of a subscription service, for example.
Absolutely true. Again, if you believe the premise that there is that audience fragmentation, the nature of the service provider's role as an intermediary can do a number of things that help content players. Clearly, content ingestion, the role of service providers in providing content delivery networks, the ability to do metadata tagging, the ability to do intelligent ad insertion, the ability to understand consumers not just on the basis of an interaction but across their profile. So whether it's that subscriber as a mobile user, that subscriber as a video consumer, or that subscriber as a user of broadband, the service provider has the ability to bring all those together. And based on a lot of work that we do with media companies and service providers, that's becoming very, very important. And a lot of the media companies that we talk to around the world are very, very interested in understanding how they can work more effectively with service providers to add value to their business.
Now, as you talk to media companies, where do they see the service providers actually providing incremental value? Obviously, I would assume there's data mining, customer knowledge, customer's location,
Sure.
type of device they're using.
Absolutely. Well, it's all of those things. It's also contextual information, understanding where that customer is, understanding given the network, what the access method is, because the ability to dynamically transcode and things like that can really help optimize the quality of experience that a media company can provide to its end customer through the service provider. So I think all of those things are ultimately very, very valuable in that relationship. I think one of the things that's sort of a bit of an interesting dimension to all of this has been the continued desire for quality of service. And again, assuming that you're able to deliver best efforts internet service in a particular way, are there opportunities to use proximity, use other dimensions to help optimize the experience that an end customer gets, and the service provider can they do that without obviously disrupting others' traffic?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned quality of experience, because that's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and I think everybody agrees that every product now has more software content and more experience richness to it,
right.
And that actually completes the product that the end user is actually buying. But it's hard to pin down exactly what that means, and I was thinking recently about the Kindle, the iPad, and maybe the Microsoft Kinect, which are three of the more interesting products of 2010.
Sure.
Each of them has a very heavy content component. Without the content, the hardware and the software actually don't provide much value. It's sort of iTunes, iPod, that kind of thing.
Sure.
I would assume that that's going to grow.
It is, and I think, however, as it grows, I think what you'll see is consumers are going to be overwhelmed by choice. They're going to be overwhelmed with just the amount of content that's there. They're going to be overwhelmed even if they know all their content, how to manage it and aggregate it. And Cisco, for example, just recently at CES launched our Videoscape offering, which really ultimately is designed to address two things. One is to really optimize on this two-sided business model experience, leveraging our CDN as well as our video capabilities, our media suite, and others. At the same time, what we see is that it's an opportunity to position the service provider as that aggregator, as that intelligent aggregator, and that's where we think there's unique opportunity for service providers and unique opportunities that media companies will want to capitalize on.
Yeah. Now, looking around globally, are there some dominant bullet points that always seem to be top of mind for executives around the world right now?
Sure. I think there are probably, I guess I'd say there are probably about six what we think are kind of the sort of the fundamental global disruptions or market opportunities. The first one is as we've talked about, video everywhere. The idea that access to video content is agnostic of access method. So we see that as clearly something that can be capitalized on. The second dimension, the second element that we see is really around the proliferation of collaboration. And it's interesting, my colleagues who work with enterprise and public sector customers are working a lot with them on helping them to rethink their business processes around the role of collaboration. So take the concepts of social networking that are happening sort of in the consumer space, and how do you apply that in business processes? So it's clearly around things like immersive interactive video. It's around collaborative conferencing, but it's really ultimately based in business process. So that's the second area. Third area that we see as really a transition point right now is, I think, a growth in the interest in how to best capitalize on small and medium businesses. If you look at a lot of the economic writing that's going on right now in many parts of the world, the view is that small and medium businesses are actually going to be the growth engine to drive us out of the current economic doldrums. If they do that, the service providers are really trying to understand, how do they play? What do they offer? What do they offer beyond just pure communications and access technology? And that's where cloud services and things start to come in, which is actually a fourth opportunity that we see, or transition that we see, is really around this concept of X as a service kinds of models. Business models, how customers, whether you're consumers or businesses, are consuming is changing. And all of a sudden that is a completely different role for service providers, both network as well as hosting-based service providers. So we see that as a key thing. Finally, the fifth area is really broadband acceleration. We see with recent announcements in the U.S. from Verizon and what's going on with Sprint, you're already seeing 4G technology starting to take off. If you look at Southeast Asia, you're seeing a ton of it already with WiMAX services in places like Malaysia and Indonesia. So we think that that's going to accelerate. And in fact, we believe, based on the work that we're doing, we're looking at mobile data growth, compound annual growth rate of about 108% globally a year. And roughly we see, when you look at 2014, believe it or not, about a third of that, or excuse me, 2/3 of that is going to be video based. So we think that is obviously huge. And then the final point, which you've already alluded to in one of your opening questions, is really around this concept of new business models, and in particular the role of two-sided business models. One of the challenges that we see with that is, how do you facilitate that dialogue? How do you create the win-wins? And again, one of the roles that my organization as IBSG plays is to work with both the content companies and the service providers to find those opportunities of mutual benefit.
Fascinating. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
And thanks for watching.